What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl, Denise Salcedo, and I am beyond excited because today I got with me a five-star guest. He is the founder of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, ladies and gents. Please welcome Dave Meltzer. Dave, welcome back to the channel. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for the very nice introduction.
Oh, of course. I can't even believe that this is your second time here on the channel. And it's been such a long time since I had you on. And this time, I actually wanted to take the time and chat with you about your career and your legacy in pro wrestling. But before we get into all of that, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's always busy. I just did an interview earlier today, and we looked back on the year, and it was like, man, this was probably the busiest news year in history, not just for the year, but also for ramifications going forward, years to come. I mean, it's like 1984, 85. It's like a really pivotal, or 2001-ish. Those were really pivotal years in wrestling history, and 2025 is going to be looked on as one of those years as well.
What do you think? Obviously, you just did a podcast right now, but what do you think those stories were in particular for you for you to say that this was one of the busiest news years in pro wrestling in comparison to some other really big years? What do you think it was that really made this year that much bigger?
Obviously, the biggest story of the year to me was the death of Hulk Hogan. But I mean, as far as ramifications, I mean, the move by WWE to Netflix, the move of the pay-per-views to ESPN, AEW getting streaming, and the whole everything that's going on with WBD. Like, what is going to be AEW's home? What is their direction? When they signed that media rights deal in October of last year, it was like, okay, after all these years, it's smooth sailing. It's like they made it. You know what I mean? They won the game, and now all of a sudden it's back. I'm not saying that it's going to be bad, but everything is a lot more complicated than it was a year ago. I mean, we don't know where the streaming is going to wind up. We don't know who's going to wind up owning WBD. I mean, we kind of have an idea. It's Netflix. We don't know if HBO Max will be kept separate, if AEW will be on HBO Max going forward. There's just when the TV and the streaming are different companies, the synergistic power of AEW to the company changes greatly, because this year, it's like if the TV ratings are down because people move to streaming, it doesn't matter. It's all WBD. They're fine, right? So the viewers moved. They're no big deal. They're still viewers. But if viewers move from TV to streaming next year, the AEW value as a television commodity is just the TV ratings, which is very different from what it is today, where it's a combination of both. And the value of the streaming is just the streaming numbers, not the synergistic content. And then you've got the pay-per-views that are going to be, Max has become the number one place for the pay-per-views. So that becomes an interesting thing, especially if AEW is not on Max and it moves to a WBD streaming service that they have to start from scratch, rather than something that's in, 55 million US homes, 58 million US homes. If they're going to go to something that's starting from scratch, like the ESPN thing with WWE, it just changes everything. So yeah, there's that, and those are the real big stories with future ramifications. There's also the various lawsuits, and who knows how those are going to come up. But yeah, I think that's like the biggest business stories, and there's the ongoing stories as well, that happen every week.
It feels like it's never ending. And, for you, having covered this business and knowing this business really inside and out, and through the decades, do you feel like wrestling still continues to surprise you each and every single year, because you know it so well and you're in the trenches of covering this for a while, for a long time now?
Yeah. I don't say surprised, but it's intrigued. And also, the fan base changes. So I do get surprised as the fans change, and as everyone does, because you just can't really predict, and that leads to other changes because the wrestlers are wrestling for the fans. And so, one of the things that I think we have to focus on is, I don't know that I hate being the older guy who's going like, you're doing too much, because people have been told that since probably 1920 or 1930. Like the older generation's always knocking the newer generation. But there is a thing as far as like the sustainability. The thing that worries me is like, you know, before when normally with wrestling, it was one of those things where injuries happen and they always will. It's a very physical business. But it's like they happen every now and then. It's like when they happen so much with certainty that you can't do long-term plans because an injury can always get involved. That's like where I go like, okay, there's issues with the style. You want, it's not as dangerous as the NFL, but you want guys to have more longevity than NFL players. So I worry that the guys, and it's the guys who are the best wrestlers for the most part that I worry about the most, because they're the ones who really drive to have that incredible match, and they take the risks and everything like that. And it was one thing when it was only Mick Foley, and we got a whole generation of Mick Foleys. And Mick Foley, is kind of like, a voice of reason. You can talk to him, or William Regal, or someone like that, where they'll tell you stuff, and hopefully, like, listen. It's not so much, oh, don't do the style, or don't wrestle so fast, because or don't do these new moves. But it's just avoid the stuff that for your head and your neck. That's the key. It's like the other stuff is okay. I mean, you're going to be banged up and all that, but you just want to be able to have a situation where guys don't have terrible long-term damage later in life. I mean, you can replace a knee, you can replace a shoulder, you can't replace a brain, you can't replace a neck. And so those are the ones that I'm the most concerned about, is the head and neck injuries.
Yeah, that is one of the things that actually just this past weekend I was chatting with Arn Anderson, and one of the
Right.
things that he brought up was, I asked him about, the style of, from the past to the style of today, and he was very passionate about, wanting to maybe see today's wrestlers sort of tone it down a little bit more, and it's like this.
Work safer.
Right.
Yeah.
Work safer. And so I'm not really sure like that we'll ever see that. I don't know, Dave, do you think that that's even possible, considering the fact that as wrestling goes, it evolutionizes, and with that evolution, you see more people do, I guess you can say, quote unquote, dangerous things.
It's like stylistically, the speed, and the speed and the flying moves, I don't see toning down, because but I just there's certain moves that are dangerous, and I think you could take them out of the repertoire. Like, you want to do it, there's going to be dangers. What I mean? It's like the thing with like the wrestling, when you bring up Arn Anderson, he would do 300 matches a year, and he could do it. And he got banged up, and his career ended young, but he could do 300 matches a year. These guys could not do 300 matches a year, and I wish that the style was such that was sustaining, where I don't have to worry every time I watch these guys, are they going to be okay to do a match in a week? You know what I mean? It's like, because before you had to be okay to do a match the next day, and that limited you, because, I mean, it's great that guys who are injured get paid, whereas in the past, at times they didn't, so you had to work through those injuries. There's so many things about modern wrestling that's so much better, but and like, again, like you said, the style is always going to get faster. It's always going to be creative. I'm for the creativity, but it's just the things that are inherently dangerous. I just hope that they can tone down on that, because it's funny, because when I think back of All Japan Pro Wrestling in the 90s, and I was pretty good friends with Doug Furness, and his mentality was that we're doing, instead of everybody else is doing 52 weeks a year, well, we're doing 25 weeks a year. So when I get to Budokan, which is the last show of the tour, I can go all out. I don't have to worry about wrestling the next day, because I'm not going to wrestle for 2 or 3 more weeks. So you do that. The problem with that is it becomes like this, you lull yourself into this sense of security with the idea that I'm going to be okay because I got 3 weeks to heal. But when we've seen the guys from that era, you go through the list of Misawa, Doug himself, Phil LaFawn, Steve Williams, Terry Gordy, the guys from that, Gary Albright. I mean, and not everyone, but there were a lot of tragedies in that group when it came to, injuries that ended their careers quicker or just beat them up. Kobashi's another one, all time great, but when he got to be 40, his body turned on him, and so you want to learn from that the idea, like with today, these guys are doing maybe one match a week or one match every other week, because not everybody, because most people don't wrestle on every show. So you're maybe doing one match every other week. Maybe you're going to do 30, 35, 40 matches a year. So you go like, oh, I used to do 180, so I can really go harder because I have more time to rest. And it's like there's truth to that, but sometimes you get that false sense of security, like, oh well, I don't have to wrestle for 2 more weeks, so I can do this, this, and this. And it's like, but that the stuff that you do that's extra that bangs up your body in the long run is probably not a good thing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out, throughout the years, and what we'll see, from like this decade, this era, and so as we press on. Dave, kind of switching gears now. I don't think I've ever told you how I became a fan of yours, and I think you're going to find this interesting because I feel like everybody that you've talked to has sort of, discovered you in different ways, right? Whether it was the newsletter, whether it was the podcast. And chances are the newsletter, is going to be the reason for a lot of people. I remember I had no idea because I was late to everything, right? I had no idea back in the day that like wrestling podcast existed. I had no idea about like anything, right? So I go online and you and Brian were the first wrestling podcast that I ever listened to. And I remember hearing you and you're talking about wrestling in ways, because I grew up a WWE fan, in ways that I had never heard before. And I'm like listening and I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is all just like new information. And I remember just being like so enthralled and invested in the way that you and Brian spoke about wrestling and the way that you guys talked about it. And I remember thinking, this is so cool. And I feel like so much of what I learned in this business, and I see so many people say it, was through your podcast. And then from there, obviously, signing up, listening to the Observer. I shared accounts. I shared accounts with a guy, but like listening to that, and it's one of those things where when people tell you, how they became a fan of yours, how they became a fan of the Observer. Well, dang, like throughout the years, fans, wrestlers, people in the industry, how is that? How does that feel for you?
Oh, it sounds really great right now. It's like, I mean, everyone's probably got a different story. I mean, the one thing that I will say that when I look back that I'm really happy about is that I think I've opened a lot of doors to a lot of people to learn a lot more about wrestling and learn that there is more than one company and there's more than one way to do it. I think that's the key. Is like so many people get brainwashed in the idea that this is the only way and it's right. And there's 50 ways and they all can be right. I mean, it's like if they work, and different things work at different times. I mean, like, you went to Arena Mexico. It's a completely different world there, but it's not wrong, right? I mean, you went there and it's like, it's fantastic wrestling. It's best atmosphere maybe in the world. And even if it's not wrong and you can learn from it. And that's kind of like what when I was younger, I mean, I started getting, I always studied Japan, and then I became friends with some of the guys from Japan, like the Funks and everything. And then I started getting tapes of Japan all the time, and I started going to Japan, and it was like a completely different world. But it opened up my horizon to women's wrestling in the 41 years ago, and it's like I finally were kind of like they were so far ahead, not just of women's wrestling, but wrestling period. The women wrestlers from the 80s. It was like I went into that Korakuen Hall the first time to see All Japan Women, and it was just like, this is like culture shock. It's just like, oh my God, there's all this stuff. And then from that point, it's like, women can be better than the men or as good as the men or whatever. I mean, those women were better than the men at the same time. So it's like, it's not like, women aren't as good at this. It's just like, so I would get frustrated for decades of the women being treated in the United States where, just well, the way that they were treated. There's so many things to say about that, and hoping that eventually someday, and thinking because look at how popular it is there, that someday it'll get there. And it's not all the way there, but it's the closest it's ever been. And I think the fans have helped that a lot because I think the people who were in charge, because they're often from the past and everything, and they had their view of women wrestling from Moolah in the 70s and stuff, or even in the 80s where it was barely existing. And so it was very hard for them. And now, it's like, I mean, I even heard, from the women that were in WWE and to an extent TNA kind of did it first, but in WWE where it's like, well, you have to wrestle like women. And they wanted to wrestle like guys, right? And they were told this is wrong, we don't want to see you doing guys moves. And it's like, no, it's wrestling moves. You want to do the best match you can, regardless. And we've gotten there. It's like the women aren't, they're not, when they're trained now in NXT, they're not trained to wrestle like women. I mean, there's still stuff that will always be there. And I mean, they are judged more by looks than the guys, but both are. But it's this, the advancement has been really good in the last 6-7 years after decades of just waiting for this to get kind of there, or knowing it could get there and it could be really big when it got there. But it's like, when you see something really big in another country or in the old days in another territory, you go, oh, this could work. And the people who were in charge, it's like they only knew one way and the other ways were wrong. It's like like I said, there's no wrong except for a wrong where nobody watches. Because if nobody watches, then it's wrong. But if people are watching and people are interested and people are supporting it, it may not be what I grew up with. It's not what I grew up with. And it's not what any of us in 10 years, it ain't going to be like what any of us grew up with because it always changes. Historically, that, right? Wrestling's different than it was 10. I mean, it's so different from when it was 30 years ago, and it'll be completely different 30 years from now.
So, Dave, now when you think about all of the years that you've spent writing The Observer and the countless of stories and hours that you spent, when you first started, did you ever think that it would become what it has become now?
No. There was no model or anything to follow. I thought because I started it right after college, or actually I was still in college, and my journalism class, which actually kind of what started it, is I was like really into the wrestling, and a bunch of the guys in my journalism class were also into the wrestling, and they were reporters, and they were just like, I can't read wrestling magazines. It's all bullshit. There's no way to get information. The newspapers don't cover it. So I thought there's an audience that is not being served. So I did start it knowing that there would be a small audience. And I thought the potential was there, but I didn't, as far as like what happened, over the next 15 years, no, I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. I wasn't planning on it being my living. I was planning on being a sports writer, and I was for many years doing both. And then what happened in 87 is I was spending so much time on wrestling and so much time on a regular job that I was like, I mean, I wasn't sleeping, and it was kind of like, okay, you got to make a choice. And everybody's going like, it ain't the wrestling. There's no way to do it. And I said, going to try the wrestling. And so, I mean, believe me, everyone was like, you're making a mistake. And in hindsight, I didn't make a mistake, because, newspapers would be around forever and blah, blah, blah. I mean, who was to know that 20 years later, the newspapers were going to be a dying business, And I keep thinking like, man, if I had listened to them, because newspapers always be there. Who knows if wrestling will be? And, there's only a limited audience and all that. And but I thought I could make a difference in wrestling. I thought that like I necessarily wouldn't, I don't know. I just thought that I had a unique ability when it came to wrestling, and I knew a lot of people and everything. And I mean, I could have done the same thing in football, and who knows what would have happened. But I was more popular in wrestling, so that was the one that I chose.
It's interesting to me because, like, when you think about it, you are so far ahead of the time now, because so many, like nowadays, when you think about what it takes to be successful in media, as you know, sort of media is moving in so many different
Oh
directions. But
yeah.
it's important, one, to, have that subscription based model, to have a niche, something that you are an expert in. And then on top of that, being your own boss and being the owner. Like, those are the three things that I think that nowadays you really need to have to like consider to like be successful. And you did it very early on. Do you ever think about like how ahead of the times you were during that period where you got everything started, or did it never like hit you? I don't know.
Um, when I do history, it does because because I've been around so long, I do have a framework on history that's different from almost everyone. Um, just because of I was there, for a lot of it, and even the stuff I wasn't there, I was always interested in it. So, but I mean, as far as like, I think in '85 when I was first quoted in Sports Illustrated, it was like, oh my God. Like, and this is actually before I made the decision to go full time in wrestling. That was like, oh my God, like Sports Illustrated wrote a story on wrestling, and the guy who did the story at the end goes, to me, and just goes, we talked to so many people, and he goes, and they're all full of shit, and you're not, and it was kind of like, oh, it's like I'm kind of valuable in that way because everyone else is like a self promoter, and I'm kind of just watching how it all evolves. And it was a really, '85 was a really interesting period. So, I think the big break was probably, when I got hired to do the national. So that's '89 to '91. Unfortunately, that paper was way ahead of its time. I mean, if it was now, it would be the number one sports thing, that there was. But back then, they didn't have good distribution. There wasn't the internet, but they had like the best sports writers in the country. And the guy who ran it, who was not necessarily a great, I don't know if he was a great businessman leading it, but he was a very moral, upstanding guy who I have incredible respect for, Frank DeFord, who was knowledgeable, very, very knowledgeable, not just on sports, but on life. And so that period really helped. It was, thank God that happened because that was probably the difference between, I mean, I don't know where exactly. I started doing pretty well before the national, but after the national, it was, I was doing a lot better. And that was kind of the turning point. And, since then, it's been great, business wise, it's been great. Yeah. I had a weekly column in the national, and we also advertised in the national. And so people who liked the column, many of them would then subscribe, and my subscriptions went. The two things that actually boosted my subscriptions the most were the national, and also there was a magazine called Wrestling Eye, and one of the guys who was running Wrestling Eye, gave me their subscription list. So we sent out free observers to everyone that was on the Wrestling Eye subscription list. And a large percentage of them, probably half, saw the Observer and subscribed because it was like nothing else there. And the Wrestling Eye was kind of an insider thing, but not like the Observer. So it was the right audience. So that really helped. That helped a lot. And then the national helped a lot. And then after that, certain media things, when it was bigger, like being on Entertainment Tonight, I think really helped, or being, if I was quoted in, doing talk shows. I did some sports talk shows all over the country. Those used to help a lot. Now it's much harder because there's no, the internet changed everything. So it's definitely harder because when I was doing it at first, there was a dearth of wrestling, real wrestling news. I mean, there was me and there was Wade Keller and to a degree Steve Beverly, but he got out. So we were like the only ones. And now there's like a million people doing it. So, and getting people to pay becomes a different thing because people are used to not paying. So it's like, it's harder, but I mean, it's harder, but it's actually still more popular than it was back then by a lot. So, it is harder for sure.
So you kind of mentioned like the difference between like from back then to where we are now. And now, like you're right, like it's like it is so much harder because you got, so many more outlets. You got a little bit of everything. How do you feel about just like the evolution of wrestling media where it's now you obviously, you have your journalists, you have your reporters, you have your content creators, and it's sort of all mixed into this like bubble
Mm-hmm.
of I don't even know how to describe it. Like when people say like, "Oh, identify yourself," I'm like, I don't even know how I would describe, what I do, just a little bit of everything. So, kind of seeing how wrestling media has morphed. I mean, did you ever expect it to become what it has
No,
become now at this point?
no.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah, no, because there was no, again, before the internet, there was no way that you could do the things that everyone can do now, So the audience wasn't there. People wouldn't know about it. It was all so underground. You only had the wrestling magazines. That was like the big, the closest thing to mainstream. And it wasn't that mainstream either. So, no, I saw nothing like this coming. I mean, the podcast thing, we just kind of looked into that one. That wasn't, wasn't like planning or anything. I mean, what happened, was I was working, I was doing the Observer, and I was I was the first reporter to cover UFC regularly. Eddie Goldman actually came after me, so I was the first one. So the owner of UFC was a guy named Bob Meyerowitz, and he was starting Yada, which was, I guess, the beginning of podcasting. It was, 24-hour talk shows on off-topic things, and one of them was professional wrestling, and one of them was mixed martial arts. So he hired me, and I did like one show with Chris Benoit of all people. Was my first guest. I guess actually I think I did one show on my own, and it was just like, oh, how talking for 2 hours with no guest is, and it wasn't terrible because people called, but it was like not enough people knew, so there were not enough calls. So then I did a show with Chris Benoit, and then I was kind of like, Brian, man, I knew of Brian a little bit, but not well. And it was just kind of like, hey, join in the show. And he never left. He was, from that point on, he was on every show. And then he started, his website. And then several years later, it was actually like 7 years later before I joined. I wish I had joined right away because, I look back, the one thing, the 2007 with the Benoit story was an absolute killer, just killer. And I was doing a website all on my own. Thank God, Alex Marvez was helping me a little bit because during the Benoit thing. But if we had been around then doing the podcast and everything like that, it would have been just so much easier, to be able to concentrate more on different things. It was that was a killer. Plus we were doing media like almost every night for weeks. And I think that was probably the beginning is like when that happened, it was like, I hope we never go through anything like that again. But if we do, I can't go through it like this. So that's when I called Brian, and it was just like, we got to work together. We're both working too hard separately. And, so that's pretty much how the thing that we do got started was in 2008. That, and, I was just working too hard. I couldn't work that hard any longer.
Okay, so at that point, you've been so like, obviously every single week the newsletter comes out, and it's so much, Dave, and you watch so much wrestling.
Yeah.
Obviously now I would assume you're used to it, and you got your routine and your
I got a
schedule
routine.
down.
Yeah.
But during that time when you're taking on all of this work and you're getting that routine down, are you ever thinking like, oh my God, this is just so much? But what kept you going? What kept you saying, I gotta watch everything, I gotta cover everything and do everything?
I think the thing was probably when Bill Watts and I had about a 2-hour conversation, and conversation is a weird word. It was not a conversation. It was Bill Watts talking for 2 hours to me when he got hired by WCW. And Bill Watts in the 80s, I talked to Bill Watts in the 80s a lot. And he was a great booker. He was a great promoter of wrestling in the 80s. And then things happened, and, WWF expanded, and he was too big to be small, too small to be big. And he sold. He was losing money. He was trying to chase Vince, but he didn't have the financial backing to do so. He had the brain. I think he thought, and Heyman was the same way. I think they both thought, because I'm so smart and I really know this business that I can make it work, but you didn't have the finances to make it work. You know, you had the brain power for sure. So Bill got out in 87. And, you know, for several years in WCW, they were going through different people in charge and going nowhere. And we would always go, you know, God, Bill Watts is the guy. Bill Watts is the guy. So 82 comes along and they hire Bill Watts. And I talked to Bill Watts, and it was fascinating because it's this guy who, like, I learned so much from this guy, and everyone did, you know, and in the 80s. And it's 1992, and I had no concept until then of how much wrestling had changed from 1987 to 1992, because we're talking, and it's just like, oh yeah, I mean, that's right in 87, but everything's different now. And he had no concept because he hadn't watched. And so it was kind of like this lesson to me, like, if you go away for a long time, you're going to be out of touch. And he was, you know, he was out of touch with fan base. I mean, brilliant guy. And, you know, he had other problems too, but that was the reality, is that, like, things had just changed in other countries, and the business and people were different and everything. And I think that the thing with me is like, I don't want to be the guy behind the times, especially when you get older, because most people at my age pretty much are, you know. I mean, I think that there's exceptions, there always are, but I think most of them are because they relate everything to the past. And I relate stuff to the past, but, like, I'm living in the present and I'm trying to live in the future. I think that's the one thing that, you know, I mean, the only person I know who's, like, always like that is Nick Khan, you know, with WWE, in the sense of he doesn't even live in the present. He's always living in the future. And I've gleaned that from listening to him so many times. And it's like, that's the attempt is, you know, it's cool to know what's going on now, but you really want to know what's going on for years from now. And all these guys are talking about, oh, this is what we did in the 90s. And it's like, it's great to have that knowledge. I'm glad I have it. I'm really glad I have it. But, you know, you can't do that because that doesn't work to this audience. It's because they've grown up differently. You know, it's like people want to put toothpaste back in the tube, and, you know, it just doesn't work that way. It's an audience, you know, the audience, you know, so many times I would go to matches and the crowd reactions would really, like, go like, wow, this is so different. I mean, I remember once as a PWG show, and somebody got, you know, knocked out essentially, you know, and before, in the 80s, people would just go, oh my God, he's rocked. It's like, it's real, and he's hurt, and blah, blah, blah. And they'd get all excited. And everyone was concerned, you know, and it was just like, and I remember I actually told Mike Tenay, and they go, well, that's what's ruining wrestling. And it's like, that's just wrestling now. It's like, and it's not a bad thing that people are concerned when they see something, you know, that's concerning, you know, rather than, you know, now, like, if somebody got knocked out and they stopped the match, there'd be some boos here and there and everything, but everyone understands. If they had done that 20 years ago and just stopped the match, unless it was a guy who's, you know, had a broken arm or something, the people would boo and just go, oh, those pussies, and they should go forever, and what's a concussion, you know? And it's like, so, but just seeing how that audience, like, they have a lot more empathy for the wrestlers than the guys from the past. The past, those wrestlers were cartoon figures, and they weren't real people. And to this audience, I mean, that's the case with a lot of the audience, but a lot of the audience is so much smarter in a good way, and they don't want people to get hurt. The other audience, man, that was what it was all about, was watching people get hurt.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of that again has to do with how you openly spoke about, you know, pro wrestling and how you shed so much light. And I feel like a lot of that audience, like, I remember, when was it? I think it was New Japan at the Pyramid. You and Brian were there.
Right.
And I remember going up to you guys and saying hi. But prior to that, I had seen you, like, walking, and there was, like, a bunch of people in the crowd. They were like, Dave! And everybody's, like, yelling your name and doing the little bowing down thing. And I just think it's so cool that, you know, you've been able to, you know, like you say, like, still, you know, be able to connect with people and inform people, because I
Yeah.
think that's like that to me is like one of the coolest things out there. If you can, like, bring this information and really shed and educate this new light to a lot of people over the years, I don't know that there's anything better than that.
It's really a lot of fun. I mean, but the key is just that you got to keep learning yourself, because if you rest on your laurels, passing you by the next day. And a lot of people are like that. Oh, I've watched wrestling for 40 years. I know. One guy, I mean, I remember 5 years ago, and he's been around wrestling much, much, much longer than me. we were talking about some stuff, and it was just like, I've been in this business for 60 years. I know all about it, and it's just like no one knows all about it, and it's going to change so much that all that basically it was someone who told me, like, AW is going to die. I know the business, and it's just like we don't know, so, oh no, what they're doing, it's all wrong, it can't work. And it's like, it's a different fan base, and all those guys did that, and now they're all, I mean, it's interesting. I think the one thing that and I've seen it twice in the last week that really bothers me is the tribalism aspect. Number one was that Sports Illustrated Awards thing, and all those people going after poor John Alba, who's a great guy, because AEW had a good year. Like last year, they, 2024, WWE cleaned up. This year, AEW had more good matches than people, and it's just like, oh, like you can't do it. And then yesterday with William Regal. And then it's the other side. It's the AEW fans. Oh, why is he saying it now? And it's like, I don't care what day he's saying it. And it's the same thing that I say. It's the same thing we've talked about right here. It's like, God, he's got a life of experience himself, and he's giving good advice, and people are mad because it's a WWE guy and he's commenting on something, that's industry. Like, he didn't say AEW. He didn't say Kyle Fletcher. Yes, did he probably get upset watching the Kyle Fletcher bump? I would bet so. I know I did. Okay. I freaked out. It's like, I don't, and I mean, I'm a giant fan of Kyle Fletcher. He's got so much ability. Best young wrestler in the business. When I saw that, it's like, I don't want to see you break your neck, and I don't want to see you end your career at 35. I mean, I just said the same thing to Ospreay, and he did tone down, but it's like, you're so talented. These guys, that the ones who take the biggest risks, it's like, they're usually the most talented guys. And it's like, you're that talented, you can take these three things out, you're still having a fantastic match. We're still going to remember the match. And if we remember the match based on the fact that you took this half Nelson superplex backwards and you land on the top of your head, that's not a good thing to remember the match by. I'd rather you remember the match by the drama level that you and Moxley were able to get. Because, let's face it, you take that out of the match, still one of the best matches of the year. And adding to it's almost like it's a negative. I know that they were trying to make it a positive, but it's just like, I just, they don't need to do it. And it's hard because, you're an outsider saying it, but with Regal, it's someone with experience. Arn Anderson, someone with experience saying it. And it's like, that's why when both those guys have talked this last week, it was like, don't be fighting these guys. They are right. I'm a big fan of today's wrestling and today's wrestlers, but they are right. This business is supposed to be, you do it without, you lower the risk of serious injuries. There's going to be serious injuries. Stuff happens. We know about Drozdov, things like that. It happens. Takayama. We want the fewest of those as possible. Even with everyone working as safe and as smart, there's going to be casualties. It's the nature of this business. But I don't want to see so many casualties based on the fact that we've taken this thing this far. And this is from someone who, loves the modern style for the most part.
You mentioned kind of the tribalism, some of the things that you've been seeing and how you see people react. Do you think the tribalism is worse than it's ever been?
Yes. It was definitely there in the late 90s because you had the big promotional feud. But even then, I think most people were kind of accepting. Like, I think people watched both products. They certainly had their favorite, and it depended on what you were looking for. But now I think that it's just a different thing. I think that there were. I think it started with maybe. I think that people got so gung ho at first on the idea that AEW was going to fail fast. And then they had to, go with this narrative that they are failing fast, they're failing fast, they're failing fast. And then it just became one of those things where it just turned into tribalism. I mean, I don't know. I mean, some people say that I'm guilty of it, but it's like, I read my own stuff. And I know, I go by numbers and I go by a lot of stuff. And I voted Paul Levesque Booker of the Year, the last 2 years. I'm not going to this year. And it's like, I think that really the people who cry tribalism on that side are the ones that are actually the tribal ones. But it works on the other side too, because if I say something bad about AEW, people go, you're nitpicking, you're this, you're that. And it's just like, no one's perfect. And my job is to kind of say, like, this is where it's going and this is why, and this is what's going to work and this is what's not going to work. And you're not always right, but that involves a lot of praise, and it involves a decent amount of criticism of every brand. I mean, I was a giant New Japan fan, but obviously I've been very critical of New Japan the last year. I'm sure that there'll come a time when, I was so critical of CMLL a couple of years ago, and now, it's like, hey, look, their business is booming. If I said, like, oh, they're doing it all wrong, it's like I'm the idiot, right? So and even like with people with WWE, it's like, it's like they're still doing well. I'm big picture, they're still doing well, and that's the key. I don't like what they're doing. You don't have to like it. It's like, but they're doing well. If they were doing badly, I would tell you they're doing badly. They need to change. Right now, there's still things you can change, but big picture, they're all right. They're good. AEW, same thing. There's definitely things that I wish they did different, but the reality is, big picture, they've had a much better year this year than last year. So that's a positive.
Yeah, it's insane. Sometimes I thought like, oh, maybe it's just social media that feels like it's amplifying
Yes.
tribalism a lot
Mm-hmm.
more. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it is.
It
I
is.
don't
It is.
know.
It is. It is. It
But
is.
it's hard sometimes. Like, and hearing you talk about like everything that you said, I 100% get it. Now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier that I did want to touch on is you were talking about, obviously not everyone can know everything about wrestling and all of that, right? But you've talked to so many people and you've known so many people in the industry. Who would you consider some of the greatest minds in pro wrestling, whether it be just by having an understanding of it, a knowledge of it, or being able to bring to life to it?
I don't really want to say. Because there's different people from different eras. Um, there's very few that transcend eras, but there are a few that do. But yeah, there's people who I learn a lot from, who I really greatly respect for their knowledge and their ability to have that knowledge still be valuable today. But there's a lot of people that I would have said, if you go back 15, 20 years, of those people, like a lot of them I wouldn't say today. Some of them I still would, because, it's one of those things. I easily could have been one of them. I easily could have been. And I think that, really, I think that what changed was just having certain younger wrestlers say things to me and basically almost force me to watch the independents, because Terry Funk used to do like, watch Japan, you'll be ahead of this curve, which really helped me for decades. And then Terry really watched the independents because he thought that what happens in the independents eventually is going to come to the big companies, and I agree with that completely. Whether it's Chance, whether it's ring style, you see it more. You're going to see it in the independents before you're going to see it on the big shows. WWE style today, it's a lot more like the independent style from 20 years ago than it is the WWE style from 20 years ago. And that's, there's some differences. So I think that, studying the independents really helped me in this era a lot. And, because the people who didn't, I think, kind of got caught, not understanding so many things that have changed in the business. And they'll come up with their rationales, of course, of, oh, but so much less popular now. And it's like, it isn't. It's just different. It's like, yeah, TV ratings are lower and a zillion people watch YouTube clips. You know what I mean? Like, for irony reasons or for exciting reasons. And, they can watch every era from every, there's so many people now that watch that 80s and 90s stuff. That's up there, and watch old, like with Netflix. I remember at the 6-month mark, there was like a list of stuff, how many people viewed all these different things. And I was shocked how many people watched old WWE pay-per-views on Netflix when they finally got them there. I would think there's so much to keep up with. How do you ever watch old stuff? And sure, there's some people who are going to watch old stuff, but it was a lot more than I thought. So you gotta, it's just, it's kind of like a rebirth and learning too. And with wrestlers, especially, yes, what they did in 1975, um, if you can't copy it completely because it's just out, but you can copy little things that they did, because there are little things that those guys who work 300 nights a year, little tricks that they learned. I mean, that people don't do, that you can kind of bring back in there. What's old is new and it's new again. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. Thinking about all of this and just like everything that's gone down. And I do think that there are so many people that have, like you said, have been those great minds for certain time periods, and kind of seeing where that goes and how that comes about. Now, Dave, I do kind of want to switch gears a little bit because, of course, I need to talk about your 5-star matches and the rating system. I have to ask you about that. Obviously, it's my favorite thing every time because as you can, I can imagine how many people have gone up to you and been like, "Oh my god, I love your 5 stars," but also, "Why didn't you give this match a 5 star? Why didn't you give this wrestler a 5 star?" How do you feel about that?
I just do it. But I mean, it's funny. It's funny because I will meet people on the street, and sometimes like I get kind of down, like, what am I doing this? Like that. And they'll go like, "Oh my God, you changed my life," or whatever. You changed my fandom with these 5-star matches, because now I go and look for them, and I've seen, I've discovered New Japan, All Japan, CMLL, you know, wrestlers, Ricky Steamboat, you know what I mean? Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, things like that, based on, the Von Erichs, just from like looking at those matches that you talked about. So, yeah, I mean, I think overall it's very, very beneficial to opening up your eyes to different styles and different things. I mean, I think it's sometimes, again, because of the tribalism and everything, it's used negatively because people don't want to hear that wrestling that they haven't. Some people want to learn the most about the most different wrestling, and some people only want to learn what they already know, and are afraid of anything new. And those people, to me, those people are always going to not like me, because I'm the one saying, hey, there's always more to learn, and there's more places to learn from. There's not only one way that works, and there's so much, like there's so many of these things. But yeah, the number of people who come up. I discovered New Japan Pro Wrestling from your star ratings, and oh my God, I love it. They're probably not saying as much this year, but I mean, like 3-4 years ago, oh my God, yeah, people, and you just, the more, I think the more different styles of wrestling, the more you kind of get intrigued by it anyway. You can burn out for too much, but that's everyone individually. I mean, some people just never burn out. I don't burn out on writing. I don't know why. The hours I spend watching wrestling does get to me. That's true. Sometimes, but there's always something new, and there's always something exciting.
How much time do you spend watching wrestling?
Well, I mean, I watch, look, I'm watching all of the WWE and AEW programming. I'm watching all the big shows from New Japan for the most part. I'm watching a lot of CMLL and AAA right now. The biggest matches, if someone, I mean, I'm not watching like a whole Pro Wrestling Noah big show, but if someone, or Stardom show, but if someone goes, Dave, got to watch these 3 matches. I mean, I really try to watch those matches. I mean, it's because especially like this year with Stardom, there's a lot to learn from it too, because they've really had a good year, and I kind of get a kick out of it, and I don't want to be behind. Like Saya Kamatani just got named MVP in Tokyo Sports. Blew my freaking mind. It's funny because I probably would have voted for her, but I would have thought, well, no one's going to even consider it. She's a woman, right? And to see, and a lot of it was not just her wrestling, but the fact that she was on talk shows and things like that. But just to see that, it was just kind of like, the Crush Cows never won. They were never considered. Dump Matsumoto was never considered. I mean, when Dump Matsumoto was getting these awards or votes for awards by observer readers, even the Japanese press was like, what are you voting for girls for? You know what I mean? And now, you could look back and like Dump Matsumoto is one of the greatest heels that there's ever been. And it's accepted now. I remember when I used to say that, people would like laugh, But not the people who saw her, but just the idea. And now, it's like now she had a Netflix series on her. How many wrestlers have Netflix series on their wrestling careers? Not a lot. And it was awesome too.
Have you ever regretted not giving a match a 5 stars, like, afterwards?
I never think about it though. It's like when the match is over, that's what it is. Um, it's I mean, if I watched all the matches again, I'm watching with a 2025, 2026 brain. They're not wrestling for 2025, 2026. They're wrestling for their year. I mean, if I'd given Undertaker and Shawn, I mean, like the real famous one, right? So that match is over, and it's like, man, I don't know if that's 4 3/4 or 5. It's pretty freaking. It's right on the border. And to me, it's like once I asked that question, and that was the question I asked when it was over. It's like that's 4 3/4. When it's 5, it's like I can't ask that question. If I ask that question, it's 4 3/4. That's why there's so many 4 3/4 star matches. If you see, because it's like a match that it's over. It's like, should I give it? When I see the 5, if you see the 5s, it's one. When it's over, it's like I ain't got a question. So I did have a question there, and there's a variety of reasons. Sometimes in that one in particular, people think, oh, it's the Undertaker dive, and it wasn't the Undertaker dive, that missed and hit the thing with Solo, not Solo, but Jimmy Snuka's son. It was I to get 5 from me, I can't predict every move you do or every sequence that you do. You got to do something different, something that I don't know. You got to cross. You can't play it safe when you're storytelling. And so that's the ones. And so sometimes, like, when people go like, oh, it's classic, it's like, what I'm telling you is that, like, I knew what they were going to do. And that's great. I can give it 4 3/4 when you're an awesome match. You know what they're going to do. Like I watched so much Kenny Omega and those big matches. He was surprising me left and right, and it's like, that's the difference is that level of creativity, So that's, if you're wondering that, and I've given plenty of WWE matches 5 stars, but a lot of the ones that I didn't was, and I would have, Angle Benoit, that's so close on that one. It's one little thing I thought was a little contrived, which I thought actually is what made it famous, which was the standing ovation. But I knew the gimmick to get it. If it was like a real spontaneous standing ovation, I probably would have given it 5 stars, but it was like, oh no, it's a little Paul E trick that he's taught Benoit, and I know the trick. So it's like, it's not going to move me as much when I know the trick.
So, one of the questions I have to ask too: how do you feel about the Tokyo Dome jokes? Whenever people are like,
Yeah.
"Would have been
Well, I mean,
7 stars in the Tokyo Dome."
I don't really care. The funny part is that the Tokyo Dome is so much harder than almost any building for 2 reasons. Number one, you're in a freaking stadium and the sound doesn't travel as well, so it makes it harder. Number 2, it's everyone's working so hard on those Tokyo Dome shows. So to stand out, maybe not this year, but I mean, if you go back to like 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, right? It's like, how do you stand out? I mean, like, there was it was the show with Nakamura and Ibushi, followed by Tanahashi and Okada. And I have watched that Tanahashi Okada match many times, and I would go like, that's a 5-star match. And I gave it 4 3/4 because they followed Nakamura and Ibushi, and it wasn't as good, on its own. And that's happened to me on several times where I'll watch a match, after, not following this incredible match that these guys have to live up to. And I mean, that's part of it. Should they be judged by that? Well, yeah, because that was the show they were on. It's the show. If it was a different show and you do the same thing, it's a 5-star match. Yeah, of course. But it's like, it's all of that. 5-star matches are so much a product of time, place. You have to have the right crowd for what you're doing. You have to be reacting to the crowd the right way for what you're doing. You have to have a storyline. You have to have a good story in the match. You have to do cool stuff in the match. I mean, if you don't do, I mean, it's like a 4-star match is a great match. So, it's like nothing deserves 5 stars is like extra credit, and over 5 stars is like, there's like 10 or 15. Like over 5 stars is something where I'm going like, dude, like when the match of the year ballot comes in, it's like, you got to watch this match. It's that much better than most matches. So that's what those are, So, but no, I mean, I'm too busy living in I try not to reevaluate the past, because it's best judged when it was done. I've watched many 5-star matches from the 80s now where I go like, what? And they're considered all-time classic matches. But with today's eyes, I go like, oh man, their ring positioning wasn't that good. Stuff, like there's a lot of stuff that guys then didn't do as well as the guys now, and it really hits me when I see it. There's other stuff that they do better because they're doing 300 matches a year, and they're better at working the crowd in a lot of ways. I mean, that's why like the CMLL guys are probably the best mix right now, because they're out there doing, they're doing 250, 300 matches a year, so they're improving and they understand how to work a crowd. Whereas the guys now that are doing 30 matches a year, they can practice and they can get in shape and they can do really great stuff in the match. But those little things about working the crowd, they're not going to be as good at, because they're not in front of a crowd every single night, and learning the tricks, or working with 50-year-old guys that have been doing this for 30 years and seeing how their tricks are getting my match over. I mean, that's one of the things where that's really where CMLL is so important to kind of study right now, is because you've got those guys in their 50s who can, they know all the tricks, and you got these guys in their 20s who are just incredible. And I can tell you from working so many matches, if they don't get hurt, those guys they're going to be the best guys in the business, because they're going to learn from those veterans, because they're working with them every single night. When you're working 30 nights, it's a lot harder to pick up and advance as quickly.
I was going to ask you, now that you brought it up, after WWE, acquired AAA, do you feel like CMLL has gotten stronger since then, as really being seen as like the most authentic, show in Mexico? Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, like, it's. I think a lot of people are lulled into something with CMLL right now because of their success, because they had a phenomenal year. I think a little bit. It's like AAA is much more popular than it was a year ago, but it is WWE. I mean, when you watch it, it's WWE presenting Lucha Libre. The agents are WWE. I'm not knocking it. I loved that Guerrero Titana show. I thought that was almost like a perfect show, in the sense that you had so many elements of so many different things. You had the great crowd, the great work. Everyone knew their stuff. They didn't go too long. I mean, there's a couple matches I would have preferred a little longer, but I just thought that they did a great job. But CMLL is still evolving into American and Japanese wrestling. And everything will evolve and mix. That's because you grow up and you watch everything. The wrestlers watch everything. They're going to mix styles. It's the pure style of Europe or Japan. People who love that pure style, that everything's a melting pot. Some people don't like that, but that's how it's going to be. But I do think that there is something to the fact that if you like traditional Mexican lucha libre, CML is your thing, and that's obviously what they have been promoting. Like, we're the real lucha libre, we're the traditional. But they still, like as successful as they've been this last year, they still got to fight, because there have been plenty of super popular companies in this world that were on fire, and WWE just beats them with production and beats them with the idea that they've got the best stars. And I mean, there were, like I said, like I saw Crockett Promotions on fire, I saw Watts on fire, I saw World Class on fire. It's fleeting. It's hard. It's hard especially when WWE's on TV in your country now. It becomes the major league. CMLL, I think what's good about them is that they do really have a great appeal with women and with kids. So that's kind of like a good thing, because when all your fans are like 30s and 40s wrestling fans, and then the kids are watching the stuff that they think is cooler, that stuff may go down faster. But hey, look, everyone is in for a fight with the two giant promotions, and WWE more than AEW. But because that's just the nature of the beast. worldwide. I mean, Europe had all those wrestling shows, and even a couple of years ago, European independents, especially in the UK, were so strong, and they're not now. And there's reasons, but a lot, um, a lot of it was, when the guys started getting discovered too. When your top guys start getting discovered, now everybody wants those guys as soon as they can get them. You know what I mean? It's like before you had you might have had 10 years on the indies, because you didn't have the right look. Now it's like if you're that good, people will. It's like even in WWE where it's so looks based, it's like we still need to get this guy before AEW gets him if he's good, because we don't want AEW to get this great worker. And just the same way with AEW, one of the things that they got to do is if there's a Leon Slater, at 17, it's like, man, you can't wait until he's the age that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn were when WWE took him, because someone's going to take him. But all that great stuff that Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn did, or the Young Bucks did, or all of those guys, did when they were younger, in the independents. We're not going to see 10-year, 20-year veterans that are that great, because one of the two companies is going to take them, when they're 24, 25, maybe earlier.
That is definitely something that I think it's a big topic, and you just broke it down very nicely, Dave. I want to thank you so much. I feel like we can stay here chatting forever. However, we just hit our hour mark, and I want to thank you so much for taking your time to come out here and kind of talk a little bit about everything. Before we go, please tell the people where they can read the Observer, where they can follow you on social media, everything.
Yeah, so I do a podcast with Brian Alvarez and also with Garrett Gonzalez. I do 4 a week most weeks. Friday show is like my favorite because it's the one where we just kind of talk about the news of the week. But the Monday show, obviously, we heavily on Raw. Wednesday, we talk about NXT and AEW. The weekend show, we talk about the pay-per-views and all that. So there's that. There's the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which is very in-depth, business-oriented. But, you get, besides the star ratings, just all of the different business stuff heavily broken down. If I think it's really if you really want to learn the business, I think it's kind of almost indispensable. It is to me, because I don't read the stuff there anywhere else, and I'm trying to learn the most. But so those are the things. That's on the Observer website. It's all on the Wrestling Observer website, and we got fan forums, and I'm on Twitter all the time, and always like taking questions on Twitter. I am very outspoken on Twitter about many, many things, and that garners a lot of interest in things like that. But but anyway, yeah. So but the main stuff is the Observer newsletter and the podcasts, and I love doing them both.
Perfect. I'm going to post all of the links to that in the description box below, guys. Make sure you guys check it out. So much to go look for, and archives, you name it, you can find it there.
Right.
Thank you so much to Dave. Thank you to everybody, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye, everyone.